Hello again, this is Bob Ellsworth welcoming you to Adventures, and we like to share those with you here on Nutmeg TV. And tonight you're going to be at a premiere of film never before seen, or I should say videotape never before seen on TV, and we're going to show you an interview that we had with Maureen O'Hara at the New England Air Museum. And she came here to visit because the VS-44, which is the flying boat that you're also seeing that show on here, the VS-44, and made the presentation and talked about her career and her background. This is what I think will fascinate all of you fans that have watched her and all of her actor friends in the movies. So share this interview with Maureen O'Hara and enjoy. This is the kind of informality that comprises all the questions that have been on your mind for, say, years of just worshiping at her movie shrine. And I don't think that that's the least that we can say, but we'll certainly be attentive to some of the things that we'll discuss informally. A warm welcome to all of you. Thank you very much for coming. And Maureen, I'm sorry, this is the first time in 3 years that Connecticut has reared its ugly winter head. If you'd have been here a year ago, you would have said, gee, this is more like a place to spend a vacation. But thank you for it's truly a wonderful ship, the VS-44, and it brought us back to your career. And if you don't mind talking a little bit about Charlie Blair as we go along, let's start with your beginning and talk about how you got started, because you had a wonderful family. Your mother had a great operatic contralto voice,
yes,
and you inherited that singing capability as well, and we'll hit that a little bit later. But you also had the ability to be athletic, and you wanted to be in athletics, and your dad, among his other endeavors in Dublin, where you people came from in Ireland, had an interest in a soccer team.
yes, quite an interest.
And this lady was in trying to get her father to think about women in soccer, and he said,
Absolutely no, that a lady should not play soccer.
and where are we today? But nevertheless, Maureen followed an athletic endeavor for a young girl in those days and stayed strong and healthy and grew into drama. And this is the talent that was handed to her by her family. And at the age of 14, I think it was, you were accepted in the Abbey Players.
That's right. But I was already in the theater at age 6.
Age 6. But again, the talent was beginning to show itself. And I think that we can move fast forward from that to the point where somehow in your endeavors dramatically, Charles Laughton discovered you. Now tell the folks about Charles Laughton, the first film, Jamaica Inn, which they say wasn't so great. I say it was a good film. And then went to the classic Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Well, I was in the Abbey Theatre in Ireland. Our whole family, all of us were in the theatre, all involved. We used to do our homework back of the operatic stage and listen to our mother sing, and she had the most glorious, golden operatic voice. I don't know if any of you here know anything about voice, but many of your contraltos drop the tone on their chest, and they sound like cranky tenors. And our mother had a golden voice. It put you to sleep. It was when she sang a lullaby, babies just loved it. But anyway, to go on, we were all in the theater. There were 6 of us, 2 boys and 4 girls, and we all grew up in the theater. My brother Charles, who was the legal advisor and location finder and everything for the Quiet Man for John Ford, went back to the United States of America, eventually founded the Producers Guild, which is the Producers Union. And he was a barrister in Ireland before he came to the United States. And at that time, the youngest man to be called to the bar in Europe was William Penn, for whom Pennsylvania was named. And then along came a young man, and he was called to the bar, younger than William Penn, and that was my brother, Charlie. Well, anyway, our family, it's a magnificent family, and we loved each other dearly, we supported each other, and, well, I think we were the greatest in the world. But anyway, Lawton, I was in the Abbey Theatre. You can't enter the Abbey Theatre or take the exam to be permitted to work and study at the Abbey Theatre until you're 14. And I took the exam at 14, and I passed, and I became a member of the Abbey Theatre. And a policeman on point duty took the exam the same day, and he also was accepted. But those are just tidbits on the side, so you know that in Ireland, you reach for the stars, and the stars come down and fall in your hand. Believe me. And I had won every theatrical award you could win in Ireland. And I was in the Abbey Theatre, and Lawton heard about me in England. He was half Irish too. His mother was from County Cork, and she never missed 6 o'clock Mass in the morning all of her life. And his father was English and ran the biggest hotels and pubs in the east of England. I have to think east and west. I'm not very good. I'd hate to be flying an airplane. I'd crash every one of you. And I went over to London, and I was to make a test. And I made this test, and when I got on the set, I said, that's it, I'm going back to Dublin, because I got my first leading role in the Abbey, and I was thrilled. That was the height of my ambition. And I went, they dressed me in a gold lame gown with pleated stuff here that when I lift my arms, it looked like I had gold wings. It was awful. And then they put a makeup on me, and I looked like Mata Hari. It was just absolutely unbelievable. And I looked at myself in the mirror and I thought, holy God, I should get out of here and get back to Ireland. My mother was with me because I was too young to be let do that. You know, they have rules and regulations. And I went down on the set, and there was a stand with a phone on it. And the director said, walk in, pick up the phone, put it down, leave, come back, change your mind, pick it up and put it down. And I was doing this 4 or 5 times. And then he said, come in, pick it up, and then slam it down and walk off. And I thought, good God, if that's a test of movies, I don't want to have anything to do with it. I'm going back to the theatre. So we left, and we went back to London. And for some reason, in the picture business and in the theatrical profession, before you know it, you have an agent. How they find out, how they hook into you, I don't know, but it happens. It happens even today. And the agent said, well, before you go back to Ireland, I'd like you to meet somebody, and can I please take you to meet them? And he took us to this office, and I walked in, and there was a man behind the desk, and that was Erich Pommer, who was the great, great producer from Germany, from Ufa in Germany, who made some of the most magnificent films that were ever made in Europe. And the other person, his partner, that they wanted me to meet was Charles Lawton. And Charles Lawton chatted with me, and then he said, would you read a few lines out of this? And when you're that young, you're very sure of yourself, very cocky, and very smart. And I said, I'm very sorry, no, I know nothing about your pieces of paper that you've got there, but I'll be very happy to take them back to the hotel with me. I'll read them, and then tomorrow I'll come back and read for you if that's what you'd like. And he said, no, that's fine, thank you. And I left. Then he, with my mother, and we went to the boat to go back to Ireland, because I had to report to the Abbey that I was back and still available. And he asked, was there any film on me? And they said, yes, there's some film from today at Elstree Studios. And he said, well, I'd like to go see it. So he went. Now, the rest of this story is not my story. Charles Lawton told it on television. He went out and he saw this film, And he thought, good God, this is awful. How could I ever have been impressed by that young woman? This is dreadful. I agreed with him, it was. And he got back into his car and headed back into London. And he said that he couldn't forget my eyes. And by the time he got into London, he had convinced himself that I was absolutely #1 in the world. And he called Eric Pommer, and he said, she's wonderful, we better sign her. You go out and see this film right away, right away. So late at night, Pommer got into his car, drove out of London to Elstree Studios, and he looked at this film, and he had the same reaction. He thought it was the most abominable, dreadful piece of film he'd ever seen in his life. And he was livid and furious, and he got back into his car to drive back into London, and he said the same thing happened to him. And by the time he got into London, he could only remember my eyes, and he called up Charles and he said, you're absolutely right, she's magnificent, we better sign her quickly. And when I arrived home in Dublin, my father had a telegram from Lawton saying that they'd like to sign me for 7 years. And so I signed.
Which accounts for mesmerizing. I think a 7-year contract from mesmerizing would suit anybody here today if they could apply for a job and do it with their eyes.
Yeah.
And you have lovely eyes, and that speaks for itself. Now, we go on to The Hunchback of Notre Dame, but this led to further identification with further classic motion pictures.
I made my first picture in London with Charles Lawton, naturally, since I was under contract to him, called Jamaica Inn. And then RKO Studios signed Charles Lawton to remake The Hunchback of Notre Dame. And Charles Lawton, with the power he had, he was the top actor in the world, said, the young lady who will be Esmeralda is Maureen Fitzsimons, which is my name. And they naturally, because of his power, had to accept. And before we went, Lawton said, we have to change your name. Nobody will ever get Fitzsimons right. They'll call you Sid Simmons, Fitzsimmons, they'll call you everything crazy, but they'll never call you by your right name. So you can be Maureen O'Mara or Maureen O'Hara. And I said, neither one, I don't like them. I like Maureen Fitzsimons, that's my name. He said, very well, you're now Maureen O'Hara. That was it. I had no choice in the matter at all. And so it has been since then. Anyway, then I went to America with Lawton, and naturally, since I was underage, you have to have an adult member of your family with you under American law. And to get my work permit for the movie, to make Hunchback, my mother had to be with me, and so my mother went with me to the United States. And shortly after we arrived and we had started making The Hunchback, war broke out. And we were all considered immigrants, but we were considered from Ireland friendly immigrants. But nevertheless, we were all thumbprinted and everything. I had to carry a card with me at all times in case anybody stopped me, to show that I was a legal immigrant in the United States of America. And actually, none of us, Lawton, Eric Pommer, none of us ever went back. We all stayed in the United States. I'm very grateful that they accepted us.
Now, just to tie in a little personal touch here, Captain, later General Blair, and the instigator of great records with this Silver Bird, the S-44A, Harry Oliva, to bring it back to life, and we'll talk to him a little bit later on. Your involvement began at a very early point here in the late 40s with Charlie Blair. Could you just elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, it wasn't really with the Queen, because the Queen had lost her importance then. It was with land planes at that time. During the war, you couldn't return to the country of your birth if you were an immigrant caught in the United States of America during the Second World War. You couldn't return until you were given permission. And in 1947, I was given permission to go back to Ireland to visit my mother and father. But I already had, by that time, permission to stay in the United States, because before that, different people received orders to get up, go, go. And my mother and I got orders to get up, go. And I was making a picture at that time for RKO, and they said, "Stop to worry, they'd handle it." And so I was sent with my mother. We were given a choice. We were, this may not interest any of you about immigrants, but we were given a choice to go to Canada or to go to Tijuana. And we were sent to Canada, and you entered Canada, you were stamped leaving, and then you turned around, and so many hours later you came back in and you were stamped re-entry. And when you re-entered, you then became a permanent resident with permission to stay. But then, that still didn't give you permission to go back to the country you came from. So in '47, I got permission to go back home. And of course, I was on the first plane out of here, and it was American Overseas Airlines, AOA, who at that time had converted to land planes. They weren't flying the seaplanes anymore. And I flew from Los Angeles to Shannon Airport, which was then just a series of little huts. There was no big air terminal or anything. They were just wooden huts. But anyway, the pilot on that flight was Charlie Blair. But then we were just friends. I was great friends with Charlie's wife then, who was a wonderful, wonderful lady who died of terrible cancer. And well, then life progressed, and many, many years passed, and eventually one time my brother Charlie, one of the many Charlies in my life. My father was Charlie, my husband was Charlie, my brother was Charlie, my nephew is Charlie. There's nothing but Charlies in the family, and let me tell you, they're all wonderful. Are there any Charlies here? What? Only one? My Lord. But anyway, now where was I?
You were telling
That's
about
old age.
Let me help you with it. You were telling about the wonderful Charlies in your life and
Yeah.
how you began to realize your relationship
Oh,
with
my
Charlie.
brother Charlie, whom I told you was the the executive director of the Producers Guild in Hollywood, and the youngest barrister, I think I told you that. He used to meet Charlie Blair all the time in New York or in San Diego or in LA, when he'd be doing Charlie Blair's flights at that time was #1 around the world. He did that, and if he didn't give up that flight, no other pilot could fly it. Not until Charlie Blair said, "I can't do it this time," then somebody else could bid for #1 around the world. But my brother Charlie used to meet him all the time. And one time, Charlie Blair came into LA, and Charlie Fitzsimons couldn't have dinner with him. And Charlie Fitzsimons, my brother, said, "She's in town, call her up and have dinner with her." And so my brother called me and he said, "Charlie Blair's in town, why don't you have dinner with him? I can't tonight." And I said, "Oh, Charlie, Charlie, my brother, I can't, I've got this to do and that." And he said, "Oh, please take my place." I said, "Okay, okay." So I went out to dinner with Charlie Blair, and that started. So
That made wonderful history from that standpoint on there. But I think what we are thinking of is the tie-in with some of the wonderful people in Hollywood, like John Wayne,
Oh, God,
and your
yeah.
association with Charlie and your Hollywood background, and what John and the
Well,
other people involved with Charlie.
yeah, Charlie Blair and Bogart were great friends. And Charlie Blair and Duke were great chess friends. And when Duke used to come down to the Virgin Islands to visit us, it was hopeless to try and get Charlie Blair's attention, or Duke's, because they would be playing chess. And there are many stories about them. Are we talking too long?
No, I'm just keeping track of it because we have, like most things technologically, we can't go on and ruminate. I'd love to do this, but I've got to be. Are we in good shape? Good.
What story shall I tell? The one about the FAA, the one about
the FAA story is one of my favorites. This will appeal to this group right here.
Yeah.
Very good.
Well, there's an awful lot of stories to tell about Duke and Charlie Blair, and the things the devilment they used to get up to. But one.
First of all, let me interrupt Maureen to say that Duke and Charlie Blair were steak and potato fans. This is how they ate over the many games of chess they played together. They were really involved. Their friendship was solid. This is the way they faced life, which was a relaxed sense of revelation. But you came in there, and what did Duke Wayne say to you at one point about your career in Hollywood?
Oh, yes. One time we were out on the patio in St. Croix, and Charlie and Duke were there, and the two of them looked up at me, and they had to be in cahoots. And Duke said to me, "Maureen, don't you think it's time you quit?" And I looked at the two of them, and I never saw such guilt on two faces in my life. And I knew they thought I was going to put up a hell of an argument. And I thought, oh, I'll fix these two. And I said, fine, that's okay with me. I quit right now. And I did. And I didn't work again for 19 years. But that was when, after Charlie was killed, and life had changed, and the wonderful director of the, come on, what are those things they're making now about out space and tricks and jokes, and it's the big thing with the kids right now.
Star Trek and...
No, you just said it. Harry Potter.
Harry Potter, oh.
Well, the director is Christopher Columbus, and he was a great fan of John Ford's and the Quiet Man. And he wrote this story for me, and then couldn't find me because I was in Ireland. And he contacted my brother, and he said, find her, she's in Ireland. This is where you get her. And it was for Only the Lonely. And that was 19 years after I quit. And I came back, and I made that picture with John Candy. But anyway, the FAA story, though, is fun. Charlie and Duke took the Queen and went off flying. And I think they went to St. Martin's and a few other places, and then they wound up going into San Juan. And some disgruntled old devil reported them to the FAA that they only had the two pilots and a man to catch an assistant on the flight, and they were short one pilot. And when they got into San Juan, the FAA are there waiting to meet them, creating holy hell. And you know, they were wrong. And you know, they're carrying on and everything else. And Charlie looked up at them because they didn't approve of Duke. And Charlie looked up at them and he says, "Oh, come on." He said, "Didn't any of you see The High and the Mighty?" And the guys from the FAA said, oh, yes. Oh, of course. Okay, you can go on, take off. They all thought that Duke was really and truthfully a pilot, and he qualified as co-pilot on the Queen.
Well, that was a great movie. That was a great movie, The High and the Mighty.
Yeah.
So I was convinced that John Wayne was a pilot.
No. Oh, you'd have let them fly off?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, okay. I was convinced. He was so solid. He went out, walked around the plane.
Yeah.
But he didn't do the whistling, did he? Of the High and the Mighty theme. Remember that?
I don't know.
You gotta get some people out here ready to whistle that wonderful theme.
I don't know. It was wonderful.
Oh,
yeah.
The whole picture was a materialistic success as well as emotional.
Yeah.
But as we get down through the various times from your classic motion pictures with John, how many pictures did you actually make with John?
5.
5?
5. I made 5 or 3 to 5 with most of the men I worked with. And I'm very sad to say they're all deceased. And very proud to say that every time they were told, like Jimmy Stewart and Brian Keith and Tyrone Power and the Duke himself, and they were told, it's O'Hara again, that they didn't say, "Oh God, not that woman." They all were happy to work with me, and I was happy to work with them. They were all wonderful, all wonderful. But unfortunately, they're all deceased.
Now, your swashbucklers are a little bit less than the classic category, although they are classic within themselves. John Payne, was that one of the leading men that you worked with?
No, he didn't do swashbucklers. Swashbucklers were with people like the Duke, with Brian Keith, with Tyrone Power, with one actor from Germany, I can't remember his name. But I had one very tragic thing to do with those swashbucklers. John Ford cast me, because I sing too, I got it from my mother. John Ford cast, Darryl Zanuck cast me in My Fair Lady. And the second head of the studio was called Lou Schreiber, and was very kind and very good to me. And he was under Zanuck. And I had made records for them to, because they had to go to New York to get the permission of the producers of the show. And he called me from the airport and he said, "Maureen, wish me luck. Wish me luck that I bring it back for you, because Zanuck wants you to do it." And he went to New York and he came back and I didn't get it. And he told me, and Zanuck told me, and it broke my heart. But I had my own back. It broke my heart because they said, "What? Maureen O'Hara, the Pirate Queen, play our Anna? Never." So the Pirate Queen didn't get Anna. But then years later, when I told them how I had wanted to play the role, they wanted to redo it on Broadway with me playing it as I had done it. And I said, "I'm very sorry. You had your chance once. You don't get a second chance." No. And so maybe I was foolish, maybe it would have been a smash success, but no way would I give in and accept something secondhand.
Let me share with you the first time I met Maureen O'Hara. She came to WTIC with the Columbia A&R guy, that's Artists and Representatives. And this is her album, with her wonderful voice. Maureen O'Hara sings her favorite Irish songs.
It's good, let me tell you.
You're darn right. That's why I hung on to it like grim death. And if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to autograph it a little bit later.
Do you know what that costs you now if you find it in New York? A couple of $100.
Well, to me, it's.
I wish I had about a few thousand of them to sell.
But this is something that I think should be in CD today, because it's that artistic, that creative, and certainly among the very favorite things that comes from the Irish derivations, like river dance and so forth, I'm sure.
Well, I as you can tell, I'm not very polite or kind. The best rendition of Danny Boy that you'll ever hear in your life is on that album. And there's another song on that album called Nora Lee. And Nora Lee became Love Me Tender, Love Me True in the United States of America. Because old melodies like that, nobody owns them. And all you have to do is re-register them. And obviously they re-registered it for Elvis Presley, and it became Love Me Tender, Love Me True. But the words of Nora Lee are much more beautiful.
I have a brand new sound system that I bought 2 years ago, and with that, and I couldn't believe this, was a wonderful 33 1/3 turntable. So all of you are invited to my house to hear these selections at $200 a copy.
A copy.
Well, I want to tell you, this is only part of your wonderful background and your career, and we just hope this continues more with anything that you deign to accept, and we'd like to see more of it. Tonight is a very brief situation. I want you to be able to talk some more with the folks here, and we are so proud of the ES-44 and the wonderful life with Charlie Blair, and bringing this all back to Connecticut where it started originally. Nice of you to share it with us. And we thank you kindly, and I'm sure you'll join me in saluting one of the great actresses of the 20th and 21st.